Good evening. My name is Prince Washington. I am a senior here at the University of Illinois at Springfield. Today we will be talking about something that's kind of controversial in modern day politics. Today we will talk about something that actually affects everybody, whether you know it or not. Today we will be talking about the consequences of trickle down economics, also to some known as supply side economics, also to some known as Reaganomics, terms that you'll hear throughout the course of this, this presentation. Let us begin. Trickle-down economics is a form of economic policy that was developed in the 1980s. It was developed by U.S. President Ronald Reagan. He is known as a leading figure in the Republican Party and Republican politics today. Trickle-down economics is a theory that he came up with as a solution to the economic woes of the 1980s. As you guys know, prior to the 80s, it was an era of prosperity that began to wind down. We were leaving a post-war economy, and the economic sectors were dramatically shifting. Some things were closing, other things were opening, the traditional ups and downs. Well, Ronald Reagan decided that the United States should embrace supply-side economics, aka trickle-down economics, in order to give the economy a boost. Now, trickle-down economics focuses on several key things. One thing that it focuses on is reducing costs for businesses to do business, essentially eliminating or reducing, in theory, supply-side costs. You may think of this the cost of raw goods and materials to be able to get them cheaper, or reduction of cost of labor, things of that nature. Another part of it is granting tax breaks, particularly to wealthier Americans. This is highly controversial in a lot of aspects that we will explore today. We will explore these matters in a correlation type, cause and effect manner. So, with the extra money that corporations were gaining by getting these lucrative tax breaks, there was the expectation that once the cup is full, the overflow will flow down to the bottom. That's exactly how trickle down works. Once it's full and they can't hold anymore in the cup, it flows down to the outskirts, aka the people at the bottom. However, whether that happened or not is the major question. This is the framework for economic policy even 40 years later, after Reagan's era. Reagan started this with two tax packages, the Economic Recovery Tax of 1981 and Understanding the Tax Reform of 1986. These two tax cuts became the model for Republican policy when it comes down to trickle-down economics. Even many years later, we see this form of economics pass again and again and again and still have the same consequences. Let us begin. So in this presentation, we will view charts, we'll view visual examples, and even a video of the effects of trickle-down economics. So in my theory, we have trickle-down economics, which has caused a concentration of wealth to transfer to the top Americans in this country over the course of the years. And the correlation is that the more and more that it happens, the higher and higher the wealth concentration begins to increase more. The big problem with this is it failed to deliver on trickles down big theory. In figure 2, it is stated by visual example that the workers' wages during these times where corporations began to make the most money ever set on record, the average worker's wages still remain stagnant. That's a big problem because stagnant wages tend to become less and less valuable over time. Or in theory, $31,000 in the 1980s is not the same $31,000 it is today in 2020. The $31,000 today in 2020 does not go as far due to several factors, including inflation that have happened over the last 40 years. So trickle-down economics, as I hypothesize, is a systematic transfer of wealth from the vibrant middle class that once was to the wealthy now. And as I said before, when Congress passes these tax breaks, the wealthy only get wealthier, and the middle class either stays vibrant or stays constant or gets no gains. Even the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, as it was named, did not fully to the full effect produce what it was promised to. So here we have figure 1 on the right by Sayers, Emmanuel Sayers. So in this chart we have several years that are notable on record. So we have the 1980s, where Reagan initiated his tax breaks. His first tax break dropped the top tax rate from 70 to 50% for corporations. And then that was in 1981. Now in 1986, he again cut it from 50 to 28%, which is akin to the rates that we see today. However, he also raised the bottom rate from 11 to 15%. So those who were at the bottom essentially had to pay more, while supposedly being in line to gain more from the top, making more money. So two things that actually were inconsistent with each other. So we have seen several times that this law, is very repetitive in the intent. So over the years, there have been many tax cuts. We have the Reagan tax cuts, followed by the Clinton raising taxes, followed by George W. Bush cutting them again, followed by Obama raising them again, followed by Donald Trump cutting them again. Typically, Republican presidents cut taxes, while Democratic presidents raise taxes. However, the job gain is not always the same consistently. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 did the following. The law gave tax cuts to the wealthy, again, as usual, by dropping the tax corporate tax rate from 35 to 21%. Now, in doing so, there was a lot of consequential actions that really penalized the middle class. One is the elimination of the personal exemption, an exemption that actually reduces the amount of taxes that one owes. That's no longer a valid exemption for single filers. So for example, I myself cannot claim myself theoretically on my taxes. So in theory, that costed the middle class some money. The next thing that really hurt about this, and it particularly hurt big blue states in the North that have higher property taxes, is the SALT cap deduction. Now, SALT stands for state and local tax deductions. So what SALT is supposed to do is allow a deduction of your state and local taxes, for example, property taxes, which are a huge issue here for even us in our state, to be deducted from your federal income taxes. So this law put a $10,000 limit on that. So essentially, while some Americans received a tax break, others may have seen a tax increase due to not being able to take their normal SALT deductions. And their SALT deductions are a big factor in economic policy for this bill. You know, a lot of states with better schools, and that's a whole different discussion, typically have higher property taxes. We're going to watch a short clip. Okay, so in that article by BBC News, it just, as it stated, the majority of the benefits of this tax package did go to the 1%, well, the wealthy or individuals in this country. Those who are at the bottom gain relatively little from it. So this is an important thing to note that even when there was supposed to be a tax cut for the American people, that some people, typically the middle class, will still have to pay more um, in another form, mat of the law. All right, another element of this that's very controversial is something called right to work. Right to work is a law that allows people to opt out of joining unions. However, by opting out of joining unions, you also get to opt out of joining union dues, paying union dues in these states. Right to work is controversial because essentially unions have been proven to increase wages and narrow the poverty gap, according to the Heritage Foundation. But when a state passes right to work or usually other collective bargaining restriction measures preventing public employee unions from bargaining for better benefits and wages, as some states have done, like Indiana. When those types of measures are put in place, that actually harms the middle class. And we see here that Missouri um, actually had right to work passed here recently. However, the voters decided that it was not right for their state and voted to oppose it. So, right to work is essentially a way for policymakers to lower wages because if a union is not strong and does not have the funding it needs to collectively bargain with employers via the union dues that will be taken away by people dropping out of it, then it will not be able to bargain effectively, if at all, with the employers, and there's lost wages and benefits that typically come with that. It's equivalent to a block of houses, as I like to call it. Everybody's paying the utility for power except one. However, that one person is also getting power, which is not fair to everybody else. That's kind of how I put a comparison of right to work out there for those who need a little bit more understanding. And I made this reference because there's a law called Taft-Hartley Act of 1947 that regulates labor unions. And Taft-Hartley Act actually authorizes states to authorize right to work if they choose. However, another controversial tact of it is that this law requires the representation of all people in a workplace. So that means if you're not a part of the union and you're not paying union dues, you're also going to still get the union benefits, which essentially is a strain on union resources since that individual is not contributing. So we're going to watch a little video.
In Missouri, voters have finally weighed in on
And in that public vote, the people of Missouri decided that right to work passed by their Republican led legislature was not for their state. Right to work, in my vision, is also a tool to reduce the supply side cost of labor, which is actually a key formatting in Reaganomics or trickle down economics.
in Missouri, voters.
Oops. So the overall conclusion is that the economy has proven to have shifted in favor of the elite Americans over the course of the use of this policy over the past 40 years in whichever form that it was implemented in, whether it was implemented in one of Reagan's two tax cuts or the Tax Cut and Job Acts of 2017 implemented by former President Donald Trump. So the economic promises of trickling down have never materialized, and as a fact, it trickled up. And there's a lot of factors to explore and why they trickled up. Consolidation of corporations, unbeknownst to a lot of people. For example, like Mariano's. Mariano's is owned by Kroger, which owns several grocery chains. So when you think you're not doing business at one retailer, you might be. And there's been a lot of consolidation. There's been of wealth among corporations as well, as far as taking out competition since the 80s. Typically, wealthy individuals engage in corporate buybacks of stocks, pleasing their shareholders. And right now, as a report I've seen since we've been bouncing back from COVID, some corporations have been on track to make some of the best profits they have in years, breaking records. So not because of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, but because of the circumstances, including COVID. So the promise of trickle down never materialized and had a lot of consequences, including every time that the policy has been used, there have been large budget deficits, according to the Congressional Box Office. Billions of dollars in the 80s, and under Donald Trump, trillions of dollars. The tax break cost at least $1.4 trillion. And as stated before, the majority of the benefits went up and not down. Meanwhile, wages for the middle class have remained stagnant. So it's not a surprise that this policy is a controversial policy. And whether you think it's a policy that's good for the United States, well, that's everybody's individual perception. But I believe I've shown that overall that it is not. Thank you.